2016. States are still spending significantly less per student than they did before the recession. It's been 8 years. The recession technically ended in 2009. I'm here to tell you today that budget cuts in education are detrimental to society and they must be stopped. I'm going to walk you through how cuts have been made in Texas, how the same cuts have been applied all over the country, and how these things can be stopped. So first I'm going to start with the lack of funding in Texas. People have had to make sacrifices, students and parents both. They've had to provide their own transportation in some cases. In a lot of counties in Texas and in many districts, the funding problems have gotten so bad that they've had to cut transportation for students that live within 2 miles of the school. One incident in Hutto, Texas, according to, I believe it was CNN, yeah, something like that. One student in Hutto, Texas has to walk a mile to and from school every day because there's no bus. And in the areas that the buses haven't been cut, parents are having to step up and pay. Parents have to pay between $185 and $355 per student for bus services. In other districts, sports, extracurricular activities, after-school activities, and school security has been cut. There are no more uniformed officers providing security in schools across Texas. Schools have had to be closed. Another incident in Hutto, Texas, Veterans Hill Elementary had to be closed. This school had about 600 students that they had to distribute throughout elementary schools in the area. The 5th graders had to be bused to the local middle school. And in the remaining elementary schools, music and art programs were cut completely. Unemployment. Unemployment has risen since 2012, according to the New York Times, to 25,286 positions. Over 25,000 positions have been lost because of budget cuts, and that translates to over 10,000 teaching positions. 10,000 teachers have been laid off. Because of these conditions, in 2014, 2/3 of Texas school districts filed suit against the state because they think the funding is unconstitutional. According to the Texas Observer, According to the Texas Observer, they've been raising requirements for testing. The STAR test was introduced. The State of Texas Assessment of Academic Readiness was introduced in 2012, and it requires students to be able to perform even more on the tests, and they're reserved for the end of the course. They're much harder than the tax tests, but teachers still don't have the resources. They don't have the funding for the resources needed to teach the material. And of course, the low scores affect the teachers' pay and sometimes their positions. A lot of teachers have lost their jobs or have lost their pay because their students haven't been able to perform on the tests. That's not fair. In 2005, our funding was characterized as barely adequate. We're paying thousands of dollars less each year for students than we did in 2005. We have yet to rebound from before the recession. We are paying $1,000 to $4,000 less per student than everywhere else in the country. That's kind of sad. Now I'm going to talk with you about funding in the U.S. It's been dropping steadily since 2010. According to CNN, in 2013, $2.5 billion was cut from the educational budget. That translates to salary decreases, programs are cut, class sizes increase, so that means students aren't getting the one-on-one attention that they need. Title I funding. Title I is formerly known as Chapter 1. It's part of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 and is the foundation of the federal commitment to closing the achievement gap between low-income and other students. Nearly 14,000 of the 15,000 school districts in the nation conduct Title I programs, and that's a quote from the National Association for the Education of Young Children. Title I funding was cut in 2012 by $1.1 billion. Funding for special education was reduced by $900 million. And as of August 2013, local school districts have cut a whopping 324,000 jobs since 2008. Now, how can we fix this? Starting with the federal government, they just need to stop cutting education. They need to reevaluate their priorities, and they need to revisit how much they're spending on education and where they want this country to go. If we send letters to congressmen, we might be able to get our voices heard. State governments, we can write Governor Abbott. And school districts, there are a lot of fundraising opportunities for communities. And attending PTA and local board meetings would help us become aware of our issues. Today I spoke with you about budget cuts in education. Thank you.
Alex, we have a couple of questions. Shane has questions.
Okay, so you talked about cutting, and I'm cutting somewhere so we can have more for education funding, and I agree with you wholeheartedly in the education, but where would you cut from? Because it's a really, really tough decision, because the majority of our spending goes towards, mostly I think it's military, I believe, but there are people that are strongly for like military spending. Military spending. So what would you suggest? A little out of the military or something else?
I just think some of the priorities of the officials need to be looked at differently. They need to reevaluate the priorities, and maybe, I know we can't change what they feel the spending should be used for, and obviously making the cuts, deciding where to make the cuts is hard. But I think if we could gear it more in the other direction, it would help. Also, taking funding away from education is counterproductive because it's causing us, it's taking money out of the economy. If you're cutting teachers' jobs, their spending capacity is less, so they can't put that money back into the economy. You were next.
What's your opinion of school vouchers in Texas allowing parents to decide where to spend the money? Kids that the government provides families, like going to private schools instead of public schools?
I think they're a good idea.
What about now, today? Are schools still in the same?
Yes, we're still significantly, we're over $1,000. I found a website with a bunch of, it's the Center for, I had it here somewhere. It was like the Center for Budget Policies. They had a whole, the website was full of graphs on how about half of the states in the U.S. are spending anywhere from 10 to 20% less than they did this year. They're still spending 10 to 20% less than they did in 2005.
Why is that? Because we pay school taxes for the schools in our local area. We do. As a homeschooler, we pay school taxes twice, for our books and for everything else.
Because of inflation, we still haven't, we haven't made even yet. We haven't come even with the losses that were made during the recession and the cuts that were made during the recession,
So inflation is killing the schools, right?
pretty much.
We drive by schools and there are all these fancy buildings. Do you think that they're spending too much on the buildings and not enough in the classroom?
Well, a lot of times the funding for buildings comes from donations. Those come from local entities that are helping to contribute to the schools. Sometimes those fancy schools, the upgrades have need to be made, but a lot of the funding doesn't come from the government, it comes from donations from the community. And those checks are written sometimes for specific purposes, unfortunately.
And there's like overpopulation issues, you don't wanna have too many kids in one school, because that creates a problem with class sizes and the teachers.
That's a continued problem.
So Kate, and then we'll go to Sarah.
I just think it's like really ironic that they're trying to get the bill passed to where the lower class gets free 2 years of college, but then they're wanting to cut, or like they don't want to spend extra money in like the primary school. I think it's ironic, don't you?
Hey,
Yeah.
but you know what though, on the whole 2 year thing, I just read that you had, to be able to be eligible for that, you have to have a standard of your family has to make a least income, I think it was like $125 a year.
$1,000?
Yes.
Well, I read that it's only lower class. That's middle class.
My
Yeah, that's definitely middle class.
But they're rich, so it's like not that.
Yeah, I read that it was like lower
I'm
class.
not rich, they are.
That's like a
There's a difference, that's a difference, just a child.
Where'd you read that?
I'm not rich, they are.
Wow, that is something.
I found other grounds outweigh here.
I don't have
We're actually we're behind areas.
Yeah, we're behind. Texas is really behind.
I love Europe.
I think that was
Behind a lot of other countries.
Yeah, we're really behind. Alex, you have, Alex, Sarah has a question?
Don't you think in certain schools, like, they put their funding towards a lot of their recreational,
Yeah.
that word, sports,
Recreation.
more than, than the actual
Football.
studies? Like football, like at where high school, literally all the funding went towards football, which we
Yeah.
suck at football.
In
seems like a
Texas,
personal
we're
problem.
ranked 39th in education, but we're ranked 3 in sports.
Yeah, it's
Really?
In my school, graduate
Yeah.
school, it's the number one
those are
school
the articles I
in
use.
sports, for sports.
Wow.
Which one is it?
But guys, my question is this, Alex, if they're spending that much money on recreation and they're making money, where is the money going? If
That's a
they're,
great question.
Bands,
Great
uniforms,
Not
football.
even. It majority of the time it's not me towards bands, like just towards the sports because that's all they care about.
In my school, it's like band and the football.
Well,
Yeah, my school was big on football and the band.
And then we got
and so we're taxing the whole students for band and football, thanks guys. Yeah,